If every performance feels like a lottery that's rigged against you, here's how to reset the system with preparation and training. If don't mess up is your mantra, this video is for you. There are many better things to tell yourself and smarter ways to prepare your mind so you don't get sucked into that doom loop. Why listen to me? I performed at Carnegie Hall after battling my own nerves for many years, and my student Jeff Lee won first prize at the 2024 Boston International Piano Competition using these same tools. He'll pop in for some cameos during this video. Point 1, your why. I don't mean the letter. Why are you sharing your music? To help my mom transition to her new assisted living. Because my friend asked me in her will to play at her memorial service. Because I need to succeed at this performance to get my degree so I can do the things that I love to do. Because I want us to have a sense of completion on the music that I've been working on. These are all great reasons, and you may have your own. The important thing is to know what it is. So when the adrenaline kicks in, you have something to hang on to as to why you're going through the experience. And forget about aiming for perfect. When you aim for perfect, you're basically signing up to be a failure 99% of the time, because to err is human, and you're almost for sure going to be making mistakes. And you'll say, well, the pros never make mistakes. That's not true. They do make mistakes. They're just much better at covering them. Knowing what your why is will help you stay on top of your adrenaline when it counts. So here's what Jeff had to say about it.
It's a big thing going on the competition was I had a lot of anxieties and fears that I'm sure a lot of people experience. Like, will I live up to my goals? At the end of the day, we're humans. And every time we play, we step up on the stage, it'll be a different experience. Mistakes will happen. They definitely happened when I competed. But I think embracing that and saying, this is where I am today is helpful. I wasn't able to do that before this competition experience. Sometimes you just can't do what you hope, but maybe that shouldn't be the goal. Like maybe the goal shouldn't be to be your peak. That's very hard. Sometimes maybe a more realistic and motivating goal is to just meet yourself where you are for the day. Play your average. If you could get up on stage and say, let me just play where I am today.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to is, in terms of self-talk, is that you're not criticizing yourself for errors. You're encouraging yourself to be more committed, which is a completely different thing. Let's move on to point 2. Learn to manage your adrenaline. I'm going to teach you a brief 60-second reset technique that's very powerful. It's called the physiological sigh. And what it involves is one deep inhale. You want to expand your ribs, try to expand your belly, and then top it up with one small sniff. And then a slow exhale. That's a great reset any time of your day when you're feeling stressed out, but it's really powerful when adrenaline is spiking and you need to get yourself into the best possible mind state to be able to play well. There are many different techniques that a person can use to manage adrenaline, and I made an entire video about it. It's called What Really Causes Stage Fright and What to Do About It. And there's a free download that goes with that video, and it's got a whole lot of different techniques that you can practice. And it's a very good idea to be practicing these techniques before your performance so that you know which ones you like and you know which ones work for you. And the more you practice them, the more effective they become. But managing adrenaline isn't the whole story, because even if you're good at managing your adrenaline, you probably will still feel some. So it's also important to be able to create a sense for yourself that no matter what you're feeling, that you'll be confident that you can play well. And confidence is not something that you just are born with. It's a mental habit that you cultivate. Point 3, train confidence. The thoughts that you think create emotional reaction, sometimes conscious, but often unconscious. And those unconscious emotions then influence your body, your level of muscular tension, relaxation, and that will affect how you play. So you want to be training yourself to think thoughts that help you maintain the optimal emotional state and the optimal muscle state for your body so that you can play well. And that requires managing your thoughts. You want to swap out don't mess up or don't screw up like you did yesterday for more positive instructions. Because when you say don't do whatever, your brain often forgets the don't. So if I say, don't think about a purple elephant, you are now probably thinking about a purple elephant. That's one good reason to swap. But also, you need to give yourself a specific instruction about what it is that you are trying to do. So saying, don't miss that leap does not tell you what thought or concept will help you actually execute the leap. So maybe your thought is, remember that the closest note is only a fifth away, or I put my second finger where my fifth finger used to be. These are all thoughts that will help you with leaps. Instead of don't rush, tune into the pulse in the left hand. Use the pattern of the right hand movement to help myself feel the pulse. Now, all these what to do instead thoughts are something that you can cultivate during your problem solving practice. You're going to be looking for what are those solutions that will help you execute the things that you want to execute. And then extract from those what are the concise, precise thoughts that you can think about when you get to those difficult spots. And I'll talk more about this idea of what to think about while you're playing a little bit later in the video. Steph Curry, Jason Kidd, Karl Malone, Michael Jordan, Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki, Ray Allen. What do these guys all have in common? Well, they are all basketball players, and they all are well known for having pre-performance routines that they execute when they have to make a free throw. And having a routine like that right before an important moment can help you train your mind to settle. It's like you've practiced doing the same things every time. Your mind gets used to it's going to respond in a certain way. When you do your routine, you're going to have a certain mental response that you've conditioned yourself into. So everyone's a little different as to what could be a good pre-performance routine. Let me share with you what mine is: to feel my sit bones on the bench and tune into my feet on the floor. And that's to try to get myself out of my head and into the body. I like to think about what is the musical message of this piece? What is the emotional truth that's encoded into this piece that I want to communicate to the audience? Sometimes I come up with an image or a memory from my own life that helps me get into the emotional state of the piece that I'm trying to convey. Then I will imagine in my inner hearing the first measure or so of the piece and how I want it to sound. So that's like the tone, color, the dynamic, the tempo. And then I visualize my hands on the keys. Now, if you're an earlier level person, you might need to actually memorize which keys your hands need to go on. And especially younger students, got to make sure you're sitting in the right octave. I've seen little ones end up in the wrong octave, and then they start and they're completely freaked out, understandably. I like to touch the keys before I play. And then it's like I already hear the music and I just sort of slide into the music that's almost already going. And let's listen to what Jeff has to say about his pre-performance routine and how it helped him in the competition. I noticed when you were getting ready for your play, you went out there and you sat down and you sat there quietly for a while. You didn't just launch in. And I was wondering, okay, what is he thinking? What is he doing up there? Because we had talked about that pre-performance routine. So I wanted to know more about that.
What I was doing is calming my nervous system. So I wasn't touching the piano during my warm-up. I was just stretching and breathing and trying to remember some of these things like that we just talked about, like what is the sound I want, what's the emotion I want, and imagining the first couple notes of the music before you start is, I think, a really good first thing, because you don't want to just start those three things. Just keep it simple.
And point 5, practice for performance. So there's really 3 kinds of practicing. One is mechanical practicing, like what are the fingerings, what are the notes, what is the tempo, what are the movements you need to do to execute the notes. Another kind of practicing is conceptual practicing, which is developing your inner hearing, your inner idea of how you think the piece should sound. I usually create this by listening to a lot of recordings of other people playing the piece, if there are recordings. Also by listening to recordings of myself playing the piece and watching the score. And then the final kind of practice is to actually practice performing. And what do I mean by that? I did make an entire video on this called Why Most Pianists Are Not Ready to Perform. So there's a whole lot more detail in that video, but let me hit a few important points here. One very valuable thing to do is to divide your piece into sections, give each section a number, and practice starting at different starting points. I like to use the random number generator. I number each of the sections and then randomly start at different sections. You could also print your paper score out, make a copy of it or print it out, and then cut it up into little pieces and then kind of shuffle the pieces around. You could also create flashcards. I have done that with a flashcards app, and then I practice off the flashcards. But those are best used as just stepping stones, especially if you're going to perform from memory. Ideally, you could start at each of the numbered sections of your piece from memory. And what does that do for you if you start from memory? Let's say you have 8 sections and you draw number 7. Now you have to mentally run through in your mind what is 1, what is 2, what is 3. You have to kind of work your way through the sections to remember exactly where section 7 is. And what that does for you is it forces you to review your mental organization of the piece. And then when you go to perform, should the worst thing happen where you make a mistake, you will be able to jump ahead. The reason you want to jump ahead is because if you jump backwards, that means you're going to have to play the part that you messed up again. And in my experience, it doesn't get any easier the second time after you already made a mistake. I did have a bad experience with that in public. I was playing on a piano, unlike my own piano, and I got almost no time to try it out. And I ended up forgetting the entire second theme group of my Beethoven sonata. I only knew how to start at the beginning, so I went back to the beginning. I started over. I had never had this particular mistake before ever in my life, so I thought, oh, I'll be able to nail it the second time. Nope. I had to leave out the entire second theme and skip to the development. And it did not start the concert off on a nice footing. Fortunately, things did improve after that. Another thing I like to do is to do cold run-throughs for the camera. When I was getting ready for Carnegie Hall, I did a cold run-through every morning, and I'm not a morning person. The first thing I would do each morning is sit down and play through my pieces. So it got to be very familiar, this feeling of playing through my pieces. And then I would listen to the recording. I would look at the score, take notes, what did I think should be different, and then work on what I thought should be improved. Or if something goes wrong and I'm watching the video, sometimes I've discovered little issues I didn't know were there until it went wrong on the recording. If I back it up and watch it again in slow motion, I can see there's a collision happening, and that's why I messed that up. So I have learned things from the video that I would not have learned in any other way. So the day of the performance, I was sitting backstage, and I was very nervous, more nervous than I could recall having been for many, many years. I knew that I would be able to do it because I had done it so many times. I had done at least 5, maybe 8 recital run-throughs in my town before I went to New York. Another really powerful technique that I explain more in the free download is called the 5 checks. Basically, you're going to take 5 to 10 parts that you're extremely concerned about that are really difficult for you and give each one a number. And then again, we're going to play these parts in random order. And the objective is to go to that part, whatever number that you draw, and play it in a way that you think is an acceptable performance the very first try. I do not mean perfect. As I said before, if you sign up to try to achieve perfection, you're basically signing up to feel like a failure constantly. And I'm speaking from personal experience. You're just going to be shooting for a performance that you feel good about. So this does 2 things for you. First of all, you're practicing covering those mistakes when you actually go to perform. You don't get to play it 4 times. You want to succeed at playing it right, or skillfully anyway, on the very first try. And so now that's exactly what we're rehearsing when we do this 5 checks method. I showed this technique to a student, and she said, I really don't like this. By the time I get to the 4th check, I feel really nervous that when I get to the passage again, I'll lose all 5 of my checks. And I'm like, that's right. That's the point. We want you to practice being nervous, because that's what's going to happen when you're actually performing. We already chose these passages as ones that you're concerned about. You are going to feel concerned as you draw close to them. And doing this 5 checks method will help you build up your confidence that you can, in fact, get through these successfully, even when you're feeling anxious or activated. The final thing I found out with this 5 checks method, that took me a lot of trial and error to discover what thoughts worked for me so that I could keep my attention focused on one thing that actually gave me the results I needed to. Sometimes it was keeping track of the bass line. Sometimes I had a little story or a little saying that went with that section. I was working with a student on that nocturne, and there's 3 variants of this one part. It comes back 3 times, and each one is different. And like many Chopin pieces, it's easy to be mixed up between those variants. We compared them all, and the last one is much more complicated and spans more octaves. And so her story for the last one was he's pulling out all the stops for the big finish. So we practiced alternating between all 3 parts, and then every time she went to play that last one, she would say out loud, he's pulling out all the stops. When I do that talking out loud, I'll hear my voice saying that in my head as I'm playing. He's pulling out all the stops. And then that reminds me which version it is that I need to play there. Another thing is you can choose specific types of things to focus on throughout your piece. and this comes from Olympic athletes, skaters, gymnasts. They have to be able to do their routine purely on muscle memory. There's no way they can execute all those moves if they're not completely ingrained. And they have the same issues we do. They cannot lose focus, because if they do, they might have a very embarrassing fall. So I think it's similar to piano, that focusing on certain aspects of what they're doing will help them execute more successfully. And apparently, Olympic gymnasts do this. They create a script for what they're going to focus on, and then they practice doing their routines while they're focusing on those things. A couple categories of things you could think about. One is to track the melody, if it's a melodic piece. So you're just listening very closely to the melody, almost like singing along with the melody in your mind. Or if you're Glenn Gould, you're singing along out loud. Another thing to do is to track the rhythm. So it's most powerful to track small subdivisions of the beat, especially through long notes. And I've seen really well-known performers doing that on stage. You can see their mouth going, like they're thinking of the 16th notes as they play. I don't know why they're doing it exactly, but it's a way that works for me to keep track of the beat sometimes. And then the final thing is tracking where I am in the bigger structure. I'm talking about the harmony. So that can mean tracking the bass line, tracking what key I'm in, especially sonata form, being very clear, like where do the two versions diverge, which exact note is it where the two versions separate from one another, and then remembering I'm going to be cadencing in the dominant, so that means I'm going to have this particular accidental. But if you're not a person that thinks that way, you can come up with any kind of story that is effective for you. It could be some rhyme you remember from childhood. It could be whatever it is that comes into your mind when you think about the journey of the piece. Do you see certain colors? Do you think of a plot line involving small animals? Whatever it is. And sometimes being very creative, the more senses that you can involve, the easier things are to remember. So developing that script about what you're going to think about, and then attentively and carefully practicing thinking about those things as you're working on your piece. So Jeff did a lot of run-throughs. He started with running through just for the camera, and then he moved on to doing smaller private events, and then recording, and then playing for people. So he's gradually increasing the pressure level. How many run-throughs do you think you did?
Yeah, that's funny. You could help me.
Or maybe you can divide it up for us. Like how many were for your phone and you watched the video, and how many for people? So any on Zoom?
Yeah. I think for all my pieces, I probably did maybe 10 run-throughs. And the way it broke down was maybe like 6 run-throughs not recorded and 2 run-throughs where I recorded on my phone. Those were very important. Those were ones where I was going to put myself to the test in a low pressure situation. I was going to try to get through the piece and just say, I'm going to treat this like a performance. And 2 performances in front of people, like a workshop and a recital, or 2 recitals. I space them out in ways where build the pressure and make sure it's close enough to the competition where I was setting myself up for success, like this feeling of I'm prepared. But you had helped me. You showed me a spreadsheet that you had set up, so I set one of those up.
If you set up a spreadsheet. In my school community, Piano with Rebecca B, we have 2 live performance events per month so that people can practice performing for one another in a semi-pressured situation that's also extremely supportive. So here's what one member had to say about these events. The performance workshops may be rather unusual in providing a regular platform for performance practice with a self-selecting audience of kindred spirits all fighting the same battle at different levels. And I do love that feeling of being there with kindred spirits who are encountering many of the battles that I've fought through my time as a performer. Practice confidence. Start calm, share your message. If something slips, don't freak out, don't rewind. Just finish the phrase, keep the music going. That's what people want to hear. Do this, and performing will stop feeling like a rigged lottery, and instead will feel like something you can repeat. Be sure to grab my Practicing for Performance PDF. The link is in the description. And watch this video next on why most pianists aren't ready to perform. If this helped, drop one tiny thing you'll try in the comments. I love hearing from you. And be sure to go play for someone that you care about.